Thank you. So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today is Friday, April 19th. It is 10:01 a.m. This is a work session with the Native Village of Eklutna to hear a briefing on their alternative proposal for the Fish and Wildlife Program. So we'll go ahead and do introductions first. We'll start with Mr. Johnson.
Zach Johnson.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Meg Zolotow.
Christopher Constant.
Aaron Leggett.
On the phone, we have Mr. Rivera. You there?
President.
Thank you. And Ms. Brawley said she'd be here just in a minute. We have council from the Native Village and parties. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? You have to press the button when the green light's on. It's live.
Nellie Williams with Trout Unlimited.
Angeline Mosky with Native Village of Eklutna.
Brenda Hewitt, Native Village of Eklutna.
Dustin Laura, NVE, Eklutna Inc.
Amanda Adams, Native Village of Eklutna.
Eleanor Weil, Native Village of Eklutna.
So in order to get started, I'm going to hand off to Ms. Zolotow just to give us a brief introduction about why we're here. And then we'll have a discussion with the village on their alternative proposal and kind of a catch-up opportunity on where things stand. So Ms. Zolotow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had learned that there was an alternate proposal put forward by the Native Village of Eklutna and that they were working with the utilities to have this conversation. And I thought, well, we said we would also like to be a part of this conversation, so we should hear the alternate proposal as well. So Ms. Hewitt shared the proposal with us, and so we were able to accommodate some time on the calendar. I'll let Ms. Hewitt kind of give you who they've presented it to and the overview, and then we also have Nellie here from Trout Unlimited, who's got some PowerPoint slides for us. My hope is that we can work through the information from them, and then at the end have conversation and questions, and we can talk about next steps. So I'd love to hand it over to Ms. Hewitt, if I may.
Ms. Hewitt.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for hearing us. And I have to tell you, I was so excited when we got a chance to visit with the CEA leadership and the MEA leadership at our Wednesday night meeting. And we were called together to visit with them and give them a counter proposal to the draft proposal that they gave us. And I can tell you that the Native Village of Eklutna and our partners have worked really hard to come up with what we thought was a great compromise. I mean, we're giving up some things, but we're staying true to the fact that we want water down the entire 12 miles of the river and that we want fish back. And within 10 years, we'd like to see either that dam taken down or an alternative. If that also provides us with fish, we're willing to listen to that. We're also willing to help with, any sort of funding that needs that they might have. And we thought it was most important to protect the Anchorage drinking water, because we know that 90% of Anchorage's drinking water is coming from Eklutna Lake. So we want to make sure that that gets protected. So what we've come up with is a siphon pump, and I'm going to have Nellie kind of go through that particulars with you in a little bit. But I think on a high level, what we were trying to do is protect the drinking water and also provide water down all 12 miles. So this pump will send water up over the glacial moraine at the top of the river and send it down. So that means that AWU's portal, you're not using AWU's water to send down just 11 miles. You're going to be using the water from the lake down the entire river, not at the flows that we want, that we know that it needs to be a robust fishery, but enough to get things started so we can start building habitat. We can start getting the fish trained to come back to the river, because we know that's going to take a little while to build up. But it also, by putting it in, is going to protect the water system. And we know that that's really important to the people of Anchorage. So can I just turn this over to Nellie?
Briefly, I would note that Ms. Brawley has arrived.
Thank you, Brenda. as I said, I'm Nellie Williams, and Brenda said I'm Nellie Williams. I'm the Alaska Director for Trout Unlimited based in Anchorage. And we have been working with the leaders of Native Village of Eklutna for a long time on this issue, more than 5 years at this point. And while I am going to walk you through the pieces of what NVE is proposing, this is definitely a group effort. So NVE crew, please jump in if there's anything I miss and ask questions. So as Brenda, and maybe we can just move right to the next slide. So we are on the brink of a final draft fish and wildlife program, going from the owners of the Eklutna Hydro Project to the governor. And this marks a really, really important part of a long process. We expect that the governor will be making a decision on this in the next couple months. And really the time is now to have, and maybe it's past time to have some really hard conversations. And I just want to remind folks that I know you guys have been tracking this a long time, but this has been 5 years of a long conversation about options and alternatives and what's best for local communities and what's best for fish and wildlife and what meets the requirements of the 1991 agreement. You know, I just want and NVE has been at the lead on so many of these conversations through the technical working group, which took place between 2019 and 2023, providing input on the draft fish and wildlife program, which we have been working on, over the past couple months. And now we're getting to this late stage phase. And I really do think that what the proposal that's being put forward today by NVE is a accumulation of many, many, many conversations and discussions and hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of listening and learning about how we move this process in a collaborative and solution-oriented way that we think addresses the concerns that we've heard from the utilities and other stakeholders in this process. So let's jump to the next slide. So this is the picture of a picture of Eklutna Lake before the dam was put in, and this is the hope, right? That someday we can have a natural lake and a river that is connected to it, so that the fish can go from the ocean to the upper reaches of Eklutna Lake. So there's streams that come into the lake all over the picture that you see, and that is really what gets us to healthy fish populations, is the ability to reach their spawning habitat throughout the year. Clearly, as an organization that's focused on fish, we are experts in fish habitat, but we totally recognize that in Alaska, healthy fish populations mean healthy families and healthy communities, and that's why NVE has been such inspiring leaders on this project. And I think the big piece of this proposal is NVE has been really clear about not just saying what they don't want in this process, but articulating the vision that they do want of a healthy, free-flowing Eklutna River, where there's a balance between healthy communities, healthy river systems, adequate flow, fish passage, and honestly, righting the wrongs of 100 years of cultural harm that has been caused. So on the next slide, I'm just going to highlight 3 big things that I want to point out that the NVE compromise and proposal does. It stays away from the AWU drinking water supply and infrastructure. This has been an issue that's been raised and is clearly a concern to all of us because we all depend on water. This proposal offers a completely different alternative, and we'll get into that. It allows a very reasonable timeline for new reliable energy to come online. This has been a huge concern that the utilities have brought up time again, and we all know that there's a gas crunch. So we have some really, I think, a good path forward to allow for the vision of a healthy, thriving river, while also addressing some of the nearer term concerns. And it's likely not any more expensive than the utilities' current proposal. So three big takeaways, and let's get into them. So we'll go to the next slide. So here are the core components, and we're going to break these down. But really, there's 6 pieces, and there's some that are bigger than others. We have the first is an alternative piping system, basically to get water into the main stem of the Eklutna River downstream of the dam. The second is an automatic gate at the dam, which is what the utilities is part of the plan that the utilities have been proposing. So that's similar. It proposes reopening the 91 agreement in 10 years, or if alternative renewable energy sources are brought before then. And then that's okay. And then the big compromise is being willing to go with the utilities proposal for, frankly, it's not enough water for fish, but in the near term, we can get the process started and get adequate water or some water in the stream, just as Brenda said, kind of get the fish in the habit of coming back. So when that dam comes down, those fish are ready. It has some components for working collaboratively with across agencies, communities, and partners to secure funding for fish passage. And then really, it's very clear on including NVE in conversations beyond kind of this current process that's underway. So let's dig in. We'll do the next slide. This is a picture, an aerial picture. If you'll see in the lower left, that's the existing Eklutna Dam. And this is a new piping system that would essentially take water from deep in Eklutna Lake, build a new facility up between the lake and the existing dam, and be able to release water from the lake through the existing dam and fully water all 12 miles of the Eklutna River. This has been worked up by an engineer. So I am not an engineer, but this is a well documented and well-designed plan. And I think it's a creative alternative and a simpler alternative to the utilities proposal, which involves taking the water and pumping it a mile downstream of the dam and putting it through the AWU water supply system. There are also some challenges that have been brought up through the process of in the winter, low flows in the lake might impact the ability to get water down the river during all times of years. And this pump could provide kind of an interim solution to help bridge the gap between those weeks or months where there's not quite enough water in the system. I'm going to just glance at my notes to make sure I have not missed anything. Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. We can dive in with questions. The next one is zooming in a little bit closer to that dam and that new river system. Is you would have water kind of storing in this existing pond, which you see the two little green rectangles. There's a pond that would provide basically some water that's pumped from Eklutna Lake to those ponds, and then automate the existing gate at the existing dam site and allow for continuous water to flow downstream. And that really, a whole additional mile of fish habitat is significant when we're talking about bringing fish back to a system. And this is not too much different than what the utilities are proposing. They were planning to automate the existing dam already. Okay, and then so digging a little bit deeper into some of these other core components, and I'll go to the next slide. So right now, the The utilities have proposed a reopener of the 91 agreement for fish passage, but with no basically hard deadlines, hard triggers, no timeline. And it's really kind of amorphous. And ultimately, it would be kind of left up to future utility boards to decide to reopen the agreement, which is incredibly hard, right? Like, no, there's very few, I think, people that would pick this up without some sort of deadline or requirement to do so. So what the proposal we're putting forward is that there's a good faith commitment by the utilities to continue to work toward fish passage or dam removal on a reasonable timeline. And the timeline we're proposing, we can go to the next slide, is either 10 years out or whenever we have firm renewable replacement energy. And all the experts have said that within the next 10 years, there's going to be at least 40 megawatts of power coming on the grid anyway, which would be more than enough to replace Eklutna system at this point. So, ideally, I think we'd like the best for fish is to have that dam come out. And we have numerous examples of when you take a dam out and you have adequate water, fish come back pretty quickly and pretty naturally. But there's other options. If that is too complicated or for whatever reason, throughout this process, there have been other options that get fish around that dam and allow them access to the lake in other regions that would work. Might not be ideal, but it would work. So, and I think, we want to keep that conversation open for the some of the ideas that other fish and wildlife experts have put on the table too. So, and then we will say that, the 91 agreement, we think allows this and would essentially kind of give us some time to continue working towards the ultimate vision that we hope to have for the Eklutna River. All right. And I know there will be questions, I am sure, but we're going to just keep on.
Yeah, actually, we do have one person.
Yeah.
Oh, we are. Okay, never mind. Ms. Alto, go ahead.
We're good? Okay.
One note, Mr. Martinez joined us right at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Okay, great. And then let's go to the next slide. And so, and this one is, there was a lot of discussion and hard conversation around this, but one of the biggest compromises we're offering to the utilities is to agree to their flow regime, which is currently 27 CFS in the winter, cubic feet per second. It's like, if you think about a milk jug floating downstream, that's 1 cubic foot. So 27 cubic feet in the winter, 40 in the summer. And I'll just be clear, I think we all would love to see a lot more than that. And a lot more is what would be beneficial for bringing fish back ultimately. But in the near term, I think we understand that putting more water down the river comes with a cost of having to pay for energy, and gas is in high demand and expensive. So we're really trying to offer a balance, right? Like, let's get at least some water down the stream in the near term, and then hope to get more flows and figure out a way to get more flows down in the long run when that dam comes down. So that, and then, okay, next two pieces I'll just quickly cover. So we have, 5 and 6, we can go to the next slide if that's easy. If not, I can work on. Okay. So the fifth and sixth pieces aren't quite as, well, they are very important. I think 5 is, as many of us have probably heard just in the news, there's a lot of funding out there for fish passage. It's really hard to secure grants if you don't have some sort of commitment from the operators that these dams actually will come out, and there's a commitment to some sort of at least long-term fish passage. So, while we would love to see the utilities commit to these future fish passage projects, and that would truly mitigate the dam's impact on fish and wildlife, we also recognize that they're expensive and are willing to come to the table as a community to help fund those future projects that we hope will happen in 10 years or sooner. And then the last one, NVE deserves a lead seat at the table on the continuing conversation. Absolutely during the current negotiations and in the longer term negotiations on monitoring the current Fish and Wildlife Program, and also I think building blocks to get to this long-term vision that we'd love to see. So, and the next slide, just to kind of break it down, and then we can start to open this up for conversation. So right now, I feel like we're in phase one. Like we're hoping to get to a place with this Fish and Wildlife Program that's about to go to the governor to begin the restoration process, like to take some initial steps and really doing so working with the concerns that we've heard from the utilities and the owners over the last many months and years. So phase one we're in, and we hope that whatever happens in phase one sets us up for phase two. And I think phase two are some of the latter pieces that I talked about, right? Like we're taking steps that keep the door open and commit to fish passage, a renewable energy placement, strong involvement from NVE, and hopefully having that dam come down, or at least the fish being able to get around that dam and utilize the watershed that they historically did. And then phase three, I think is just the vision that we'd all love to see for the Eklutna River is, thriving communities alongside a thriving fish-filled river. That's a benefit for recreation users, a benefit for anglers, a benefit clearly for NVE, and really a benefit for the region. And then I will just end on, and you have not seen this from presentations from the utilities, but in the next slide, Alaskans want to see a healthy river, and we saw that in large numbers during the comment period that was held earlier this year. 4 out of 5 Alaskans support returning water and salmon to the entire Eklutna River watershed, and that support is bipartisan. It's science-based. Including you all have spoken up heavily on this. And even Alaska Department of Fish and Game has gone so far as the current draft plan is not adequate for fish recovery. So really, I think this compromise and ultimately the vision for the Eklutna River is strongly backed by the public. We've analyzed this data thoroughly. So if you want to go into the details, we can do that later. And I think lastly, I would just say thank you all. I know this is a really complex issue. I know there's been a lot of iterations and discussion over the years, and thank you for sticking with it and being willing to dive down in the weeds. And really thank you to NVE for leading what is an incredibly inspiring vision for Eklutna River and the villages around it and the community of Anchorage. So with that, I will turn it over to Brenda.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question on, if you can go back a few slides, it was the one where you mentioned the replacement of about 40 megawatts of hydropower. I think it was. Yeah, so just to confirm, because I think I was looking on the Chugach website, and I believe the current dam generates about 25 megawatts of power. Is that right? I mean, assuming it's running at maximum capacity.
I believe that's correct.
And then I think just for folks to know, I looked it up. Fire Island does about 17 megawatts, again, at full capacity. So just for context, I guess I wonder, just have there been other discussions around what that renewable energy would look like, or are you aware of plans to basically expand the dam at Eklutna? Because I know it's an old dam, right? But it's in that location. So I don't know if you guys had heard anything about that.
I'm not aware, through the chair, I'm not aware of any plans to expand on the Eklutna Dam. Bradley has been talked about having an expansion down there, which would give them some more firm renewable, sustainable power. We've offered to put more windmills on Fire Island. There's room for more. There's another opportunity for some more windmills up the inlet a little bit. So there are several proposals out there that we think in the next 10 years we'll be able to replace that. And again, nobody's compromised more than the Alaska Native people. So we know how to compromise. And what we're doing is we're really reaching out an olive branch to give them as much leeway as we possibly can, but we want our river back.
Ms. Salatil.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation and bringing this forward and the work on a compromise position. We still are hearing from the power utilities that a delay isn't possible. So is it possible for the portal valve option to be forwarded along with the compromise option, kind of as a yes and proposal? And the reason I ask is, as we know with any major capital project, it will go through design refinements, permitting, just so many phases where maybe in that process, giving the and portion, the compromise might come out to be the better solution after all. So is that something that the Native Village of Eklutna would be comfortable with, to say, we have both of these options to go to the governor as something that one could be a more permanent fix and one being a more interim solution?
We've had no indication that they're even interested in anything that we've submitted. I flat out asked them, was there anything in our proposal that you could agree to? And they couldn't provide an answer. So I don't have any confidence that they would submit it. And we have no power because we're not a signer to the 91 agreement.
I understand that, but my question, I guess, more is assuming a different posture by the parties, right? Regardless, would you be opposed to both moving forward? I guess is maybe the better way to ask that.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think it would create a false narrative out there that there's hope at this point.
Fair enough. I think.
Dustin.
We've had discussions on what I call uniting under one banner. The federal agencies, the two federal agencies, FWS and NIMFS, they are drafting a letter that share their resource goals that highlight their option. Fish and Game, we had a discussion with them. They talked about that, and they actually looked at the siphon pump early on, but discounted it because of Cooper Lake. There was an issue there, but they did admit that there are different siphon pumps available on the market. And with this option, I believe it uses 3 separate ones. So you can decommission 1 or 2 and still maintain some sort of flow to facilitate maintenance. But I had thought, and even the utilities, Arthur Miller had suggested, I encourage you guys to submit your own proposal to the governor directly, a report. So I thought that maybe if we coordinated with the agencies, we could submit some sort of alternate plan that included this plan that we have here today, and then highlighted the options that the federal partners or federal agencies have pro-offered. And they're very similar to ours, but they're different. But the two federal agencies are very, very close in comparison to each other. But I think that probably would be our next alternative because, as President Leggett had mentioned, the utilities weren't, they circled their wagon pretty quickly and they weren't willing to admit that they liked this idea at all. I believe if Mark Lamoureux were here, he would say this is the most elegant solution because it does provide water to probably the most critical habitat along the whole entire river. And as it's in the data that the utility companies or McMillan had provided, that last mile provided 4 or 5 times more rearing habitat than the rest of the river. And now I question their numbers, and I always have, but if they're willing to provide stuff that we can use in support of this idea, that's what we're going to do. But we're going to try and put together something to offer for the governor directly, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. May I ask a follow? Okay, thanks. So one, did you get any response from the utilities? It sounded like you just got nothing, like no response one way or the other. You didn't get an outright rejection, just silence?
If I may, sorry. It was kind of, I know they were there. They didn't have enough board members to make a decision either way. They did not have a quorum to vote on it. I know they had taken a recess because litigation had been brought up expressly, implicitly, however you want to put it. And after that happened, they circled their wagons and they said, thank you for your proposal. But we understood that we were there to propose something. We weren't necessarily looking for any indicators, yes or no, but it would have been nice, especially since our plan essentially meets most of our objectives. And I had to be convinced that it did because our proposal and this current proposal are so far apart. But from what I understand, Fish and Game had told me, it wasn't exactly river science that they're allowing 40 CFS down the river, which is essentially a creek. It was more of a capacity issue. So their report was disingenuous to begin with.
Okay, and then my other question, two more questions, I'm sorry. One, this meets what the federal agencies were your alternative or your compromise meets what the federal agencies were hoping to see. Did I hear that correctly?
When I spoke with them, I spoke with the three heads, respective, I guess, liaisons in those agencies. They were very optimistic. Fish and Game had already been briefed. Like I said, they'd already considered it, but it would meet their resource goals today. But eventually, full fist passage was on all three of their, I guess, minds.
Great. And then, we always have to talk about it. So how much does this cost?
So we know that there was another siphon bypass pipeline put in. It was 8.4 million. There's still some other costs that need to be looked at, and we know that we're going to have to be putting in a little bit of a dam in order to make this work. We think it's going to be pretty close to the 57 million that they're also proposing for the AWU portal that won't give us what we want. And I also want to say Dustin was very kind, but when we had this meeting with CEA and MEA, I will be honest with you, there was dead silence. It was deadpan. It almost looked like one of those cartoons where you see a corporate board and then they have this very stoic look on their face and they were listening but not hearing. And it was very frustrating to feel that they weren't even there to have the open conversation of what a compromise might look like. I think they've been told by their attorneys, this is what we're going to do and we're going to go forward, and heck with you.
So I have a question. Oh, wait, Karen, you were first. Go ahead, Ms. Bronger. No, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
Well, my first question, members all, I'll just ask about the cost. So it's going to match the portal cost probably. Another thing I wanted to ask is, I believe last summer we heard a report about a pump type thing, and sludge or the silt at the bottom of the lake was one of the reasons, but you feel like there's a different kind of pump that will perform even in the sludge. And I have another part of that too, but go ahead.
No, that's true. Assembly Member Bronga, there wasn't a pipe option, a siphon, there was option. And this is different. This is slightly different because it goes into the bottom of the lake, which is, there's more water. And actually, even if we get some silt in there, that's natural. I mean, it's glacial silt. So but we feel that this is the right solution and we've redesigned it. I don't know is Don here by any chance? I thought he was going to be available, who was the one who designed this.
If I may.
Yeah, this is Don Spiegel. I'm here.
There. Don, can you talk to the engineering behind this siphon pump that we're offering and how it differs from the earlier version?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure the earlier version had the same. What we're trying to do is put a straw, a second straw, if you will, into the lake. That's probably about a half-mile pipeline. Don't know exactly where it'll go. That'll depend on more data from bathymetry and lake bottom. But it basically is a mimic of the intake that's out in the lake now. Their crib, if you will, they call these things an intake crib. Their crib for the power and for the Eklutna Water Project rests at the lake bottom. Initially, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they built it in. They dug a little channel in the lake to help feed water to that crib. We're basically a lot less water. We need a lot less water than that crib. But we're basically putting it right on the bottom at a chosen location at the bottom of the lake. Basically, maybe a little bit higher than that crib, but the top of it would be at the same elevation as the top of the existing crib. And, it would have means to back flush to clean it from the pump station. There's details that would have to be worked out, but it's quite typical for a water supply to have a crib out in the lake and 2,500 foot pipeline or more or less to a circular pump station. And then once it's at the circular pump station, we can lift it up over the moraine and drop it on the moraine, basically. So there's a little bit of complication with that line, with that 2,500 feet or so of pipe. But the silt level, if it's of concern, it's not really of concern of the existing intake. But if there's some silt level that becomes a concern in the pipeline or at the crib, we would have some means to back flush that and actually could go out there on a boat and clean that. In the summer months, in the early summer months of May, June, July, that crib with a top elevation of about 814 is only the top of it's only about 10 feet down. So you'd be able, on a dry year, it would stay flooded, but you'd be able to see it. I've seen the existing crib standing on the shore of the lake in the past. We've been able to see the crib when the lake is low. So it's not that it's out there and never to be seen, never to be maintained. There would be provisions for maintenance of the crib and the raw water and the suction line to the pump station.
Thank you. And I have one more quick thing. And this may be just like you go, oh my God, she's so dumb. But I was looking at a map. Thunderbird Creek is not that far away. Have you ever thought about the possibility of, because they do merge at the bottom, somehow bringing some water from there in higher up?
Thank you. And actually, the water that you see in the Eklutna River right now is water from the Thunderbird. But it's not allowing us the water that goes all the way up to connect to the lake, which is what we need for sockeye. So,
yeah, I'm not sure if that is a year-round flow. I think it is, but I'm not sure the hydrology of it. I'm not sure how much water. How much and what the flow regime is of that. It may not be enough to meet the needs of the 27 CFS and 40 CFS that's proposed right now. I'm not sure that there's enough water there.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Laura.
I've Googled what a 40 CFS river looks like. It's a creek. It looks like Thunderbird during the summer. So when you drive by Eklutna, Thunderbird Creek is flowing through it during the summer. That's about 40 CFS.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the elevation of it either. I'm not sure if that would feed in high enough to be of use. That could be looked at, but I haven't looked at that personally.
So I have a question now, Don. Passed on to me by my co-chair here. The question is, in the Eklutna alternative, what is the impact on the AWU infrastructure?
Well, I think the worry I have, the main worry, is that they're going to need to use the intake where the Eklutna water tunnel connects to the Eklutna power tunnel. There's a deep shaft.
Okay, I
and
think
a
there's
series of
can I
valves.
ask a slightly different question? I might put a nuance to it. Compared to the 1991 proposal that the intransigent utilities are proposing, which connects into the AWU pipeline, what is the parallel impact of this project to that infrastructure?
As a standalone project, this proposed alternative has no impact on AWW infrastructure.
Right. So
Now, if
it
you couple
decouples.
proposal, it can be decoupled. If you couple it, so there's some redundancy and reliability in the supply going down the Eklutna River, then there would be the impact that we've talked about already for the Eklutna Water Project. But it'd be mitigated because there's a second straw, if you will, into the lake.
Right. So it reduces the potential side effects, if you will, onto the water supply.
Correct.
All right. So I have another question for the village. So I think we would like to hear more about the development of the alternative proposal so that we can contemplate joining that proposal. And when it does go to the governor as an alternative, because we recognize the utilities have staked their ground and they're not moving, that we should begin that alternative conversation as robustly as possible. It would be great to hear at some point from the federal parties to understand where their position is. I understand they're not going to want to talk because then they're going to get in the middle of all this. But it seems like if there is an umbrella you're creating with them, we would also like to contemplate what that means for the municipality.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think now that we know definitively where we stand with the utilities, we're going to circle back with the federal partners and sort of plead our case.
You can let them know that at least in general, until we get specific, you can't say for sure, but the local government is standing with the Native Village.
Understood.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I have just a really brief reflection, thinking about this project and other projects. First of all, it's always interesting when folks talk about, salmon being a priority, and then when there's real opportunities to restore salmon in the context of 2024, where we have massively declining salmon populations in other parts of the state. And I recognize we all can't speak for everybody. I think we're on the same page, so I'm going to say things that I know you all agree with. That's one comment. I guess the other one is recently we've been talking about daylighting Fish Creek in other parts of town, and looking back to our land use plan. Granted, the land use plan just covers the Anchorage Bowl; it doesn't cover Chugach Eagle River. You guys have your own plan up there, and I don't know what it says about the Eklutna River, but there's language in there that says restore the natural environment and wanting to daylight creeks and talking about the economic value and the social value really of doing that. And so I mostly want to just point you toward that, because that policy is not specific to this project, but it's just interesting that we as a community consistently say those things and we want them. And then in multiple occasions when there is a clear opportunity to make policy to implement those things, we are often very hesitant. So I'm glad that we are pursuing this and really pointing out that that when you have that intent, you have to do it on the ground. So again, I acknowledge that this is all speaking to the choir basically, but I just wanted to point you to that land use plan and some of those other policies to really illustrate the gap often between intent and actual action. Thank you.
So I don't know that we have anything more for today. Ms. Zalatel.
So I guess I would like to walk us through, I know we're just learning about this, but we're on a short timeline. So one, thank you. And thank you for accommodating our request so quickly to come and make this presentation. I'm not 100% clear on what the next steps for the 91 agreement are, like what their trigger date is for when they're going to transmit to the governor. What I do know is we have a meeting on Tuesday night, the 23rd. And so I guess I'll just let my fellow members know the space I'm in, which is considering whether or not a resolution makes sense, suggesting that this opportunity, if something is going to be transmitted to the governor, that this option be put forward as well and stay in the mix. Kind of that yes and proposal opportunity, and that we would really, it effectuates our goal as is under code, because we did pass our general policy position, and that we were weighing in because we do, at least under the current payment regime that's proposed, have an interest. And then I did ask Mark Corsentino if he could be here from AWU, and I will try to follow up with him before Tuesday night to see if he can weigh in on any impacts, that he sees with AWU. But Don Spiegel is the same consultant we had hired previously to evaluate the portal valve, and he did raise some issues about the AWU infrastructure. So I guess I want to kind of toss that out to membership here. If a late on the table, sorry, folks, resolution on this item would be welcomed or not. But I think our window is closing here really, really quickly.
Yeah, Meg, I wanted to address your first question about the date for submission to the governor. The one thing in our meeting that was abundantly clear, and they made abundantly clear, is this will be submitted to the governor at the end of the month, full stop, period. Nothing is changing that. There's no 2-week extension, even though if you read how it's laid out, it's not a mandate that it go. There's some flexibility in there within a few month period, but they made it abundantly clear this will be going to the governor at the end of the month.
So separate from kind of a resolution that Ms. Zolotel was discussing, we have already drafted another resolution that I am contemplating whether it should be what's called, what new members probably haven't heard, an uncodified ordinance. So it would take 2 meetings, but it would take more of the effect of law. And it has to do with demanding that they decouple the water facility from the 1991 agreement proposal, because they just don't have a right to do that, no matter what the RCA or other parties might say. And so we'll be discussing the possibility of laying that item on the table for introduction for hearing at our special meeting already scheduled on the 30th. And so there are a number of moving parts and pieces with all of this that will come forward for discussion in the near term, whether it's laid on the table for passage Tuesday night, because it's already Friday. There's no time to get on the addendum. That should be published today. And, but it is time sensitive because, as you've heard, the 30th is upon us, the end of April. So all told, the intent is to continue to protect the interests of the municipal taxpayer, the municipality as a whole, in which we are finding ourselves in a position where 2 utilities have been granted the authority to effectively set the tax levy. They'll tell us, oh, no, we don't do that. You get to do that, but we don't have any choice in the matter. You just have to do it or get sued. And then the courts can direct us to do it. So effectively, that's what their proposal does to us, because of a failure of a series of administrations to take seriously the rights of the municipality sitting at that table. So there also may be some budget amendment proposals coming forward on this matter and discussing what to do with the Q1, because, well, I won't get into the details on that yet, but so there are a lot of moving parts. We did hear back from the RCA this morning that they denied our request to reopen, but we are looking at our options at this point for that. And all of that is just pre-staging, to my friends at the utilities who are listening, to get us to court, who are listening but unwilling to participate or show up. So that's the trajectory we're on at this point, because, again, the intransigence of the utilities to hear what this assembly has been saying since 2017. But they pretend like we've been heard. So anyhow, Mr. Leggett.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I think, as I stated in the meeting, unfortunately, there's not one thing that the Eklutna people haven't had to go to court to fight over what we believe have happened. So we find ourselves in a similar situation that we found for decades. And unfortunately, it looks like we'll continue to.
As far as my peers on the assembly and the assembly by policy has adopted, we stand with you. Anyone else?
Chinan.
Hearing and seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting. I think, convene back at 10 after.
No.
No?
11:30.
Oh, I'm sorry, 11:30. Great. You have a little bit of a break.
Thank you, everyone.